It's so good to see y'all. And for those of you in this room, it's always fun right at time. I know that it's somebody in the back letting them all in. It's like popcorn over here on the Zoom screen. They're just, I see all these faces all of a sudden. It's kind of cool. But friends, if you're on Zoom and you watch me turn to the right, I got somebody on YouTube was asking. It's because that's where the TV is, where I can see the people on Zoom, and I try to include them. And I know they see me here, and so I'll try to make sure I limit my look to out here, but when I ask questions, I am turning over to them. A couple of little logistics. I was kind of excited, if you could tell, about this week's lesson. And so I made you 16 slides or 15, I think. That will probably be, that's a three, I have to cover one every 3 minutes. And so we'll see how that goes. Y'all know that that's against my better judgment. But did I mention this is my favorite book in the Bible and we're near my favorite chapter? Yes. And so we're into some of the good parts. How to say this? There's a place in Jerusalem called St. Anne's, and there in that cathedral, on the back of the pews, it says, "If you came here a tourist, we pray that you leave a pilgrim." All right, isn't that a good thing? My hope for you today is that if you came here a tourist or a person kind of wondering about what's going on as we turn to Holy Week, I hope you leave here a person transformed by the movement and grace of God and with a lot more interest in what's happening in the life of the church next week, because we're going to be touching on some of those themes that are going to be prevalent in the Holy Week ahead. So I draw your attention to the email I hope you all got with our schedule. Next Wednesday, we will not have this Bible study, but if you want an opportunity to participate in the stories we're talking about today, all week we have events, different things going on. I encourage you to go to mdumc.org/Lent, and you can see a full calendaring of those. Also, too, the following week, I just want you to know we're going to be blessed to have Pastor Jennifer Verschreckengost with us, who will be leading this session. It's a long tradition that Laura has enforced, and I mean that like she forces me to go away after Easter, and so we'll be out of town for a few days after that. There is a little thing coming up called Easter Sunday. Maybe you've heard about it. Tell your friends. It should be an amazing day. But we'll be there. We'll have 2 more sessions after that and go through May 4th. But I know you're going to be in great hands with Jennifer. If you've never had a Bible study by Jennifer, I can assure you her slides will be significantly better and more polished than mine. She's really amazing and quite a leader, and a lot of theological insight that you'll be blessed by. So let's see, I think that's all the kind of covering the bases. As far as what to do this fall, I'm kind of leaning toward a topical study. Ooh, a little different. And the reason is I think we should look at kind of what the New Testament says about life and death. And I thought that would make for an interesting study as part of a What Happens When series. So what happens when someone dies? I thought that would be a fascinating look. There's a lot of Bible on it. There seems to be a lot of confusion when we talked, and it's really from last week or week before, right, where we talked about the differences that happen in the Bible from what we think would happen in the Bible about talking about death. So anyway, that's a teaser. I may not, if somebody really says, "Oh no, Brad, we need to do another book," let me know. Another book of the Bible. But I just thought it tends to be something a lot of people ask questions about. Might be a fun topical thing. So kind of look to that. Does that sound interesting to anybody? Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, that's good. Then I just want to make sure I'm filling the room right. Let's make sure. All right. Great. All right. Well, friends, let's open with prayer unless there are any other logistical questions. Any announcements in the back that I forgot? All right, but look there. You've got if you look to the back of the room, on the right is Vicky, and on the left is Judy, and those are two people that keep me lined out. So I want to thank them for all their great work making this possible. You've also got Julia and Margot in the back who are do the production of slides. You've got Matthew as well back there. I see his hand waving out behind the thing, making sure sound's good. And of course, our facilities team that sets this up, and as well as the food service that makes sure we have everything. So we're deeply grateful for all those who make this possible. Let us pray. God of grace, God of mercy, and God of love, your grace abounds abundantly in our lives, and we are truly thankful for the blessings you place in us. We are so privileged to get to read your holy word and to know of your love and grace. May it jump off the page at us in ways that are transforming and life-giving this day. And Lord, may we be truly grateful for all that your Son has done for us, that indeed Jesus Christ might be the Lord of our lives and the Lord of our world, that we would always be reminded that whatever we face, you are with us and we are not alone. Meet us again this day and bless us with your presence. Amen. Amen. Well, today's lesson starts out right after where we left off. And while I was tempted to kind of jump back to Jericho and tell the story of Zacchaeus, if nothing else, because I love the song, Zacchaeus is last week. And so right after that, we transition here in verse 11, and we have these people, and we'll go to the next one, that people are listening to Jesus still, right? So here we are at this time where the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost in chapter 19, verse 10, and in 11, they're still listening to this. So although for the time that we had to separate those stories, I want to remind you, they're together. They just saw him call Zacchaeus forward, okay? And remember what they did? Were they happy about it, or did they grumble? They grumbled, and all of them grumbled. Even the other tax collectors and the other sinners knew how bad Zacchaeus was. And it's there that you get this parable. And it's the parable of the 10 pounds. The parable is told because he was near Jerusalem and because they supposed that the kingdom of God was to appear immediately. Think about that. They're going, if we can have even Zacchaeus forgiven, right? Something's afoot. It must be happening now. And they thought it would happen immediately. And I think you're going to see why, right? Jesus tells a parable here in 19:12. It keeps going. A nobleman went to a distant country to get power for himself and then return. He summoned 10 slaves and gave them 10 pounds and told them to do business with these until he returned. And here pounds means like the English talk about the word for money. So he gave them 10 coins and he said, do your business for me while I'm gone. But the citizens hated him, sent a delegation after him saying, we do not want this man to rule over us. We don't want him to be king. When he returned, having gained royal power, right? So who won? The man, yeah. Having gained royal power, he sought the servants to see how they did while he was gone, right? They wanted to know, how did it go? And the first report was that this person who was given 1 coin made 10, right? The next person who was also given 1 coin made 5. And at each turn, he says, well, great, you are going to rule 10 of the cities I conquered. And to the other one, you're going to rule 5 of the cities I conquered, right? So pretty good by verse 19. Let's go to the next slide. The other came saying, Lord, here is your pound. I wrapped it up in a piece of cloth, for I was afraid because you are a harsh man. Okay, if you're talking to your boss Don't lead with "you're a harsh man," okay? Taking what I did not deposit and reaping what you did not sow, right? And this is what's there. The guy kind of the king. How do you think he felt about that? I mean, he'll even go so far as to say, "At least put it in a bank so I could have returned with interest." But for goodness sakes, I mean, he doesn't call him a fool or idiot, but I know that's what's kind of on his mind. He goes off on him, right? It's pretty bad. He's a harsh man. That's accurate. He says, but literally, it's so funny. He says, "I'm a harsh man, am I?" Let me show you. "You'll be judged by what you said I was." And then you get this down here in 26 and 27. He he goes on to say, "I tell you, to all those who have more, more will be given, but from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and slaughter them in my presence." I mean, Jesus says that in the parable, right? Huh. You know, later we're going to see a scene where the disciples think that they need more swords, and they're trying to trust Jesus only having two of them. If you're hearing this and you know that Jesus is got a claim on the throne, what are you thinking Jesus wants to do? Right? You hear him tell this parable. What do you think that, pretend it's not Jesus. If you heard any other person who had a claim to a throne and they're saying, "Anybody who doesn't want me to be king, slaughter all of them," even in a parable, what do you think? He's going to take it. He's going to grasp and take the throne. Now, anybody who read Philippians knows that's not what Jesus does, right? It's going to be different. You've read the end of the Luke, right? We know this. You've been there on Easter. But that's the expectation going on when he tells the parable. So let's talk about the parable of the 10 pounds. And let's go to the slide 3 on that, 3 of 3. There we go. There's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. Most of you probably think this is the parable of the talents from Matthew because it sounds familiar. Now, in Matthew, the story goes that there was a man who went away on business, a very wealthy man, and he ends up giving servants charge of things. He gives one person 5, another person 2, and another person 1, or it might be 3 and 1. And each gets the return that doubles, except the guy who was given 1 who didn't do anything at all. And it's a parable about waiting. And in Mark, right, you get this account also, but Mark just shortens it basically to be on watch. He uses the same language of someone who's going away in that. And in Matthew and Mark, they really focus on this long duration of which the person is away and to be on watch. But Luke has something slightly different. Also, too, many of you will probably want to know just what's the difference between a talent and a pound, or mina is also the name actually in Greek for it. Just to let you know, if you think of like a talent is like having $100 bill, a mina would be like having a 1, but a mina has more value than that. So it's more like having $100 bill, and the talent is like $1,000 bill would probably be a better ratio there. So a mina, the pound that we're talking about today, isn't no money, but it's not like having $1,000. It's like having $100. So you can do something with it, but it's not as much. About worth 60 shekels, right? Because you all know the value of a shekel, right? I mean, I just put that in there so you'd have that. All right, so Luke's account is about a king, right? Some want the king and some do not. Did I remind you that this is taking place right after they all grumbled over Zacchaeus? They don't want to be part of a kingdom where Zacchaeus is forgiven, right? They don't want to be part of something where grace actually has to be the main thing. And so they won't have anything to do with it. And what does Jesus say? Right? Also, the value of what they were given is that they were entrusted with something. When you read the other parable, it's going to be really almost equivalent of gifts that have a relationship to spiritual faith. And it's implied that people have them in different portion. But here in Luke, everyone gets the same amount. You notice we don't even get the story of what happened to the other 7 pounds, right? We just know he went off on the third guy. We don't even know what happened to the other 7. But everybody's given the gift. All 10 servants have gotten something. And it begs the question, what are they doing with what God has given them? You can see why the Pharisees and scribes especially would be offended by this. That they're the problem. They were given the keys to the kingdom and they dropped the ball. Right? It's pretty explicit. And so now we set the stage for Grand Theft Auto first century style. Does anybody have somebody who's played Grand Theft Auto? Do you know the video game? It's very popular with the kids and all that, but it's the weirdest thing. I have wrestled with, the next slide, the entry into Jerusalem, slide 5 here, with what is up with Jesus stealing a colt, right? Like he doesn't have to hotwire it. Right? Like, what's going on with that? And I've thought about that for years. Like, what is on with that, right? He's heading to Jerusalem. He gets to the place of the Mount of Olives. Jesus sends 2 of his disciples. He likes to send them 2 by 2. Directions are given very clearly. If someone asks, when you get to the unridden donkey, tell them the Lord has need of it. I mean, so you're going to take it and the owners are going to complain. Here's what you say to them to complete the theft, right? It's kind of like, what's up with that, right? Don't you ever wonder those kind of things? The Lord needs it. Have you ever thought about that when you read it? No. So the reason you probably have never thought about it is you know what the people of Luke don't. You know that Jesus is God in flesh. It's his donkey. Now, I won't say that you live like that, right? But you know that God owns everything. Okay? They don't. So it's a very kind of interesting text. But what you're going to see is it's a preview to everything that's about to happen, because every part of the story right now, all the way through the entry to the crucifixion, makes it abundantly clear that Jesus is the King. Everything after the Zacchaeus story is, if you don't understand that Jesus is the Lord, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so there's a shift. So one of the funny things today in scholarship is sometimes you'll get these some people who they tried in the 80s and 90s to talk about a kind of a progression from, well, the people at the time didn't really hold Jesus in this kind of way as Lord or God or that, and that got invented over the decades. Books like Luke just shoot that all down. The earliest people, read Paul's writings. I mean, the closest you can get in Christian writings to the life and times of Jesus. They held Jesus in the highest regards, believed that he was fully divine and Lord of all. If not, he's still on a donkey. Luke wouldn't have been okay with that. The reason it's not a problem is because Jesus is Lord. He's eternally God. He created the donkey. It's his donkey. Okay? All right. So I probably made too much of that, but I just want to drive that point home. Okay? And they brought it to Jesus. and they set Jesus on it. And then there's this amazing scene where they take their cloaks and they lay it on the donkey and then lay it on the road. Now, I always try to explain that to people because they don't really appreciate what it means that they're laying the cloaks down. Remember, for a person of that time, when you traveled, your cloak became your home. Your outer garment became what you lived in, right? So I often tell people it'd be the equivalent of me taking my iPad where I do all my work out of and laying it down in front of Jesus. It would be me taking my wallet out and letting Jesus walk on it. It's literally everything that the poor would have had. And for even the wealthy, it was still what they had when they traveled, everything. It's a way you show obedience and servitude to a king. Okay. I want to show you a picture next there. You can see it on slide 6. This is a look at the place where he's going. If you come with me here on May 4th or May 8th, we'll head out and we're going to this place. And the thing to kind of observe is from where he is here, this is just down from the crest of the Mount of Olives. And I'm actually walking here on the path that Jesus walked. Okay, and this is what it looks like today. It didn't quite look like that back then, but you go down into the valley and then you go back up to the Temple Mount. And can you see the dome up there at the top? It might look better on your slide in front of you there. But the thing to kind of know is that this here between the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem is the Kidron Valley. The Kidron Valley has for centuries had numerous burials, right? Does anybody know a psalm about, oh, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of, I will fear no evil, right? Thy rod and the staff that are comfort. That's talking about this. It's walking down into the descent. And when you get to the bottom, where some of our stories next week happen and the week after, Jesus literally is looking up at Jerusalem, towering above him, with the oppression of the authority there literally over him visibly. So how this unfolds in geography. There's also something else I want to point out in today's story. These here are all tombs. Now, most of these are probably early Dark Ages time, and there's some down here that are more medieval and that. But you'll notice, and I don't know that I've got a good picture here, the Jewish tradition is to place a rock on top, and that will be important in a minute. Okay. So as he's approaching, on to slide 7, as he was now approaching the Mount of Olives, the multitude of disciples began to praise God joyfully, right? Why are they so excited? He's taking the throne. Also, too, for those that were with us in 1st and 2nd Samuel, isn't this the route David went? You notice the similarity, right? And they are saying from the Psalms, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest, right? I mean, this is triumphant. And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, these poor Pharisees, they want to hang with Jesus. I kind of feel sad for him in a way. I know I've been kind of harsh toward him. But I feel kind of bad for him because at some level, they're still with Jesus all the way up to the entry. And they kind of in their heart, they want him to be right. But they just can't. They're like, dude, tell your people to shut up. They're going to come kill us. Knock it off. This won't work. And that's the problem. Because the truth is, they don't really want to be part of the kingdom of God. And that's the issue. And Jesus says, I tell you, if these were silent, if all those people in the crowd, my disciples and followers, were silent, the stones themselves would start to sing. So let's take a look here in slide 8. Colts, cloaks, and rocks, right? Let's I was trying to, find a way to tie those together a little bit, but it's just things that I want to draw your attention to. You need to know that in Zechariah, there's a prophecy about how the Messiah will enter, right? Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Okay, what's Zion? Zion is the hill Jerusalem is built upon. So rejoice, daughter Zion, right? Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem, the city on top of the hill. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey on a colt, the foal of a donkey, right? So this unridden, or basically young donkey that Jesus is riding on, right? It's fulfilling this prophecy. You can find it in Zechariah 9:9. And I would encourage you, for the sake of time, I didn't put the whole chapter and all the different things, but if you doubt me that it's about Jesus, look at the rest of it. There's even more there, okay? So look at that whole chapter. What do the cloaks mean? I think we've kind of touched on this, but it goes back to, how many of you ever heard Yosemite Sam say, "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat," and then he'd stomp? Do y'all remember that? Right? How many of y'all know who Jehoshaphat is? Right? All right. Jehoshaphat is Yehu's son. All right. And I know you were all wanting to know that. All right. Because you don't want to be a Yehu. See what I did there, right? It's still in the thing. But Yehu is a person who became king and usurped the throne. He kind of takes it, right? When they're putting down their cloaks, they're doing what Yehu's friends did after this crazy dude came up to Yehu and anointed him unexpectedly and told him all this stuff about who he was and what God had prophesied about him. And he's like, and his friends were like, "Who is that?" And they were so drunk and having a party, and they're just like, "Hey, that was nothing." And they're like, no, what was that about? And he sits there and he goes, "Well," he says, "I'm going to be king," and da-da-da. Well, they're all there. And so when he walks out, what do? They lay their cloaks down, right? To show that they will follow him, right? It goes well, and then it doesn't. And you can read all of that. But here's the reference, just so you know. It's in 2 Kings. But they're saying Yehu is king. And not just king, but somebody who can go grab the throne. When they put those cloaks down in front of Jesus all along the path, they're saying, "We are going to follow you and be your army." Right? They're all coming together. Okay? So what do the singing rocks means? I think I mentioned the graves. They're also in the Psalms. And the Psalms, really, you can't go more than 2 or 3 Psalms without all creation singing. But it's something a little bit more. And I didn't know how to write this in a bullet point, so I just want to try to bring it forward. The joy of the Son of God becoming flesh, and now proceeding to the cross to forgive all sin, is of such amazing joy to the heavenly host that nothing in creation will not sing out the praise of God for what God is up to. Okay. Remember back in chapter 15? What happened every time someone lost got found? There was a celebration in heaven. Heaven is going bonkers over this move. Like, this is the fulfillment of what they had waited eons for, right? I mean, I think recently we just discovered another few billion years, a star that exceeded all expectations. And right now there are scientists redating the universe potentially to say that instead of 14.5 billion years, it might be 16 billion plus, right? I mean, I'm a nerd. I know that. I enjoy that. But reading about that in my spare time, the thing that's cool about that is, think about how long the heavenly host waited. Of course they're going crazy. I mean, how long did y'all wait for the Astros to win a World Series? And you saw what that did to this town, right? My dad talks, now my dad went to A&M, I went to Texas, and since I always tell things from the Texas side, let me say from the A&M side, my dad jokes about being with the Aggies when they were so bad. He said, we didn't kiss when we got a touchdown, we kissed when we got back to the line of scrimmage or got a first down, it was that bad, and stuff. And so he talks about those days. And so, what I want you to know is like, they erupt with celebration. And to miss the celebration of God in the Passion of the Holy Week, and to miss the two extremes from the triumphant entry to the cross, between there, you have the valley of the shadow of death. You have the deepest despair of the crucifixion, the confronting of all human sin. But it's the distance between those peaks and the valley that make the life we live so cherished, because it's love that's found in those places. Whether you're at the lowest low or the highest high, God knows you and loves you anyway. And if that's not cause for celebration, friends, you need a heart transplant. We're in a city that does that well, apparently. But my goodness, it's what the whole thing's about. So yeah, I get excited. I'm sorry. Let's keep going. Slide 9. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem and the sadness. He also looks forward to that time when he knows what's going to happen, where literally not a stone will be left on top of another stone. Part of what we saw in that picture back earlier, if you flip back to that earlier slide, we don't have to do it up here, but if you look back to that, is that we still have the mound that was set there and built by the Romans during Herod's time, but not a single stone of the temple was left. The reason that you have a mosque now on top of that big platform is because no stone was left when the Romans kind of got sideways with the Jewish people a little bit later. So you're going to see that in about another 50, 60 years here. I want to say that was about 67 AD. And so after the sacking of Jerusalem, all of that will be destroyed. And that's what you have there. Then he goes, and I don't know. It's hard to know what to do with the turning over and the driving out of the money lenders in the temple. And we see that here. It's kind of as if he's picking a fight. And I know we don't think of Jesus that way, but that's what he does. I mean, he runs into the place where people are having exchanges and trade for the necessary rituals of what they need to get atonement, right? And then he drives them all out. Now, the problem is that people who were doing the buying and selling, do you know that people can be kind of good at taking care of their interest and neglecting the interest of others? I know y'all have never seen that, right? You've never noticed that that's how people operate. Well, here you had that literally in the place of the approach to the temple, where people would try to steal people. And the thing that's fascinating, and you're going to notice this all the way between now and the cross, the things, I know all of us learned Jesus said these things, remember, but what Jesus says is quoting scripture. So what he's doing is quoting what's already been said. So Jesus said, "It is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers," right? The house of prayer reference can be found back in Isaiah 56:7. The den of robbers in Jeremiah 7:11. What this house, which is called by my name, has this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your sight? I too am watching, says the Lord, right? And he's waited from the time of Isaiah 500-600 years to now, the time of Jesus at that time, right? And he's done. So just like the celebration has built up, the frustration of God has built up. And you watch those two collide in Holy Week. Every day he was teaching in the temple, the chief priests, the scribes, and leaders of the people kept looking for a way to kill him. I mean, friends, if somebody went and started knocking over shelves in Walmart, right, the authorities go ballistic, right? He goes into this place, if they, how to say, they're trying to find a way, but the problem is all these people are kind of being taught by Jesus in the temple, and the other authorities don't know how to get to Jesus without disrupting. They don't want to mob. They don't want to rabble. They're good, civilized folk. They want to do this in the least intrusive way. I mean, you see what's going on? Slide 10. And so Jesus is teaching the people and telling them the good news. The priests and scribes came with elders. Let's see if we can't say something that might kind of get the people. What they want to do is drive a wedge between Jesus and the people. So tell us by what authority you're doing these things. And Jesus answered them, well, let me ask you a question and you tell me. Did the baptism of John come from heaven or was it human origin? Okay, what did they do to John? Right? They took his head off. All right? So he's like reminding everyone present, what would they have said? Y'all got John killed. You're why he died. We like John. We like Jesus. So Jesus is not unsavvy as to crowd politics, right? So he says that, right? They discussed it with one another, and you can just see the poor scribes and Pharisees. They're just if we say this, he's going to say that, and have you ever tried to think for somebody else? Friends, don't spend so much time looking for rational responses out of irrational people. Just love them. Just love them. That's where I see the most people getting it wrong. Right? The only time she's not here, so I'll tell this little story. The time I got in the most trouble in my marriage was Laura was having a really good argument with me when I wasn't present. She had thought through all the things I would say. And here she was getting, and she's so much nicer than me. I can't even, I'm ashamed to even mention it. But it was one of those things where she was getting mad at what she thought I would do. And I had to interrupt her, and I got in trouble. And I was like, Laura, let me be stupid on my own. I'm going to mess up, but at least let me mess up before you get mad at me. Don't get mad at me because I'm going to mess up. Let me go ahead and do that because I might surprise you occasionally, right? And so, that was probably not the right way to proceed. But it's there. But that's what they're doing, right? And so you kind of know what's going on, and they're trying to think for Jesus, and it doesn't really go well for them. And here he said they discussed it, and here's the thing. They answered that they did not know where it came from. Then Jesus said to them, well, neither will I tell you what authority I'm doing these things. Because if you can't even recognize God in John, you're not going to get it in me, right? Next slide. Then Jesus makes the point in the parable. And when I mean point here, I mean it's a sharp point, okay? He began to tell people about a vineyard and how it was leased to tenants. And the man went off to another country for a time. When the season came, he sent a slave to the tenants in order that they might give him a share of produce of the vineyard, right? But the people beat the man that was sent, the servant that was sent, and sent him away empty-handed. Next, he sent another slave. That one they also beat, insulted, and sent him away empty-handed. He sent a third one, and this time they wounded him and threw him out, right? Next slide. Then the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son Perhaps they will respect him. But when the tenants saw him, they discussed among themselves and said, this is the heir. Let us kill him so the inheritance may be ours. So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? Right? Now, a sermon often will end in a question, right? And let them ponder it and think it out. But what does Jesus say in verse 16? He keeps going. He will come and destroy those, the emphasis was mine there, just so you. He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, heaven forbid, right? Why? The chief priests and scribes know that that's about them. They're getting it now. Like all this other time, they don't get what Jesus is saying. They don't get what Jesus is saying. They don't get what Jesus is saying. They can understand now Jesus is saying, look, I gave you all these chances. I'm done with you. That now they understand. But that's the impasse we're at. So remember, people often ask me like, well, when should they repent? Or how does this all work? Well, friends, if you have to ask, go to God and get it straight. Like, why would you wait? Are you kidding me? If you were given all these chances, take one of them. At any one time, any of those tenants could have done something different. But what were they motivated out of? They wanted the property. I mean, friends, a lot of us try to build up a life of security here on this that we're at. This is nothing eternally. If you want this and all it has to offer, it's nothing compared to the eternity of heaven. Have we become functional atheists? Do we believe this is all there is? Are we like those Sadducees we're going to hear about in a minute, doubting the resurrection? The Pharisees should have known better. It's about eternal things, about the wisdom of God that is forever, the joy it can give us now. All right, let's go to slide 13. Well, the chief priests and scribes are a little crafty. That's how they got in their positions. They're politicians. They know how to do this. And so they changed tactics. So he looked at them and said, what does this text mean? The stone that the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and it will crush anyone whom it falls. When the scribes and chief priests realized that he had told this parable against them, now they're getting it. They wanted to lay hands on him at that very hour, but they were afraid of the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be honest in order to trap him by what he said, so as to hand him over to the jurisdiction and authority of the governor, right? They want to get the Romans involved. The reason they want to get the Romans involved is so they can kill him, because they can't kill him. Okay, so it's bad, all right? So let's see these traps they try to set. So next slide, on slide 14. The first one is taxes, right? There's a real problem. The Romans think they're gods. And when we say, they lord it over people, they literally try to lord it over people and pretend that their rulers are these powerful supernatural entities. And it kind of in Roman society, they're much more pragmatic people. So they don't think of it the way the Greeks did or the Egyptians. They're a little bit more like, they know it's not a thing, but you still have to go do the honor and all that. They aren't really fixated on the divinity of the emperor. They just know they better kneel or the power will get them. So they're very pragmatic people. But the Jews, this has always been unsettling. And you can go back and look at Esther. You can go back and look at other books in the Bible that really talk about this. Daniel is a great one about how do you navigate these earthly authorities who They get to be king, they get some power together, and they think they have kind of godly powers. Like, how do you navigate that and keep faith with God, right? And so you have all these stories in the Old Testament. So it'd be logical that these smart chief priests and scribes are like, well, here's a trick for you, Jesus. Is it lawful to pay taxes? Isn't that a good question this time of year? Right? I mean, you're not going to like the answer, friends. Jesus said, give all, right? Not some, but give everything that has the emperor's picture on it back to the emperor. It's his. Give everything else to me, right? To God, right? So these are the things. Okay, they kind of don't know what to say. Like, how profound is that? Give to God everything that's God, but if the emperor stamped his picture on some of it, and then how does that work, right? Because isn't technically the stamp and the money that was meant, like, see what he did there? He's causing a little pain in the brain, and they're not. They think he made a simple answer, but really, when he claims give everything to God that belongs to God, oh, hold on, he made a big cosmic answer, right? And so they're going to wrestle with that. The spies become silent now because the spies apparently weren't very bright, and so now the Sadducees try. Okay, and the text gives you a little side. Luke wants you not to forget, some Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection, right? He gives this little aside in 27. But they go on this. Does anybody like that movie, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers? Right? It loves this text here. But the idea is here's why they don't want to believe in the resurrection. Our law says that if there's a family that has 7 brothers and the first brother dies, the next brother has to marry his wife. Friends, you grew up with Disney movies and other romantic things. I'm so sorry to tell you, but in the first century Jewish tradition, women were property. I've said it, yeah. And so again, no, they don't have a voice in this. And no, I think that's absolutely wrong and backwards and horrific. And I'll submit my other Bible studies that I've said this in. But I just want you to know it's not a good thing. So what you have is but the system where that's what would happen. And so their question is, and again, if they have a child or a son, really specifically a son that can care for them, there's a different set of rules. So they want to be clear that in this complex quiz they're giving Jesus in the temple in front of everyone else. You can just watch the crowd just kind of rolling their eyes, like they don't get it, right? They just don't understand. But they walk him through the whole scenario. If she marries this brother and then he dies, and then marries this brother and then he dies, and then marries this brother, and he goes through all 7. None of them have a son. In the age of the resurrection, whose wife is she? Is she? And literally, the question they're asking is, who is she going to take care of? Because that would be her role in that society at that time. Are these other 6 brothers not going to be able to have someone taking care of them? You see the problem with the thing. And this is distressing to them. C.S. Lewis probably answered it the best. Someone asked him for his radio show in England, what sex would be like in heaven. Right? Wasn't that a kind of a crazy question? And he was like, that's like a child who's eating chocolate, not understanding what it's like to ride a bicycle. It's just not even of the same comparison, right? Jesus goes the kind of same way on this to say, in heaven, the love, the grace, and the glory of God abounds so much that people don't think about anything else. Right? In fact, I probably said that wrong, because technically there won't be grace. It won't be necessary. The love of God will be all that is, right? Of these that remain, right? Faith isn't necessary. It becomes love because we're in the presence of the divine. Same thing with hope. You don't have to hope anymore because it's realized, it's fulfilled. It's kind of cool, right? So he gives that answer right here to them, and it's pretty impressive. So much so, right, that they, and literally here, I'll give you the phrase, it's in 20:34 through 36. They do not marry, but are eternal like the angels, right? He doesn't mean they're divine beings. He means they're eternal, that they're forever. And so these things don't go like that. Jesus explains then a little bit more to kind of get at the Sadducees' doubt in the resurrection. And he talks about how when they say the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Sarah, when Moses says these things about God, it's always in the present tense, because for them, those people are living. That he makes the argument that Moses believes in the resurrection, right? Which we think he did. And some scribes acknowledge that Jesus spoke well, and you can see that in 2039. And then now they don't know what to say because Jesus has taken on all comers, right? And then the last slide here on 15. Y'all didn't think I would make it. Yeah, I didn't either. But here we are. He gives a he gives a little discourse on David, and it's more of a beautiful question right here in the middle. David calls the Lord, Lord, God of all creator, and also calls the Lord the Messiah and his son. Like, how does that work? Luke, I wonder, how does that work? Right? That's why he writes the rest of the book. That's what it's all about, is how that works. It works because Jesus is God and flesh, fully human, fully divine. It's cool. And then Jesus, now in the hearing of all, after that beautiful question, says, beware of the scribes, right? Because the scribes like him, kind of. But remember, the scribes are these are human Xerox machines, okay, friends? And they're not known for creative, compassionate thought, all right? And so they like to walk around, though, in long robes. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honors at the banquet. They devour, though, widows' houses for the sake of appearance and say long prayers. I wish my Church of Christ uncle had heard this. They will receive the greater condemnation, though, right? Because what they're doing is they're using those things that the widow puts in for things that aren't of God, right? But to aggrandize themselves. Maybe there are some pastors in this town who need to read this text, just perhaps, right? And then at that time, I went ahead and went into 21 just to touch, because I think it's so important. At that time, Jesus saw some wealthy people putting money into the treasury, because remember, he's there in the temple. And at that time, right behind them was a woman who waited to the end, and she drops in 2 little copper coins. And he says, friends, she's put in more than all those before, because that's all she had. Honors it. And not those copper coins are right. They're pictures of what they look. You can get them all over the Holy Land. They often call them the widow's mite. A mite is just a little coin that's a fraction of a shekel. Okay, it would be like 1,000th of that mina or pound we talked about, and about 1,000,000th of those talents that Matthew talks about, right? It's almost nothing. But she put it in anyway because she wanted to do something for somebody else. She has compassion. All right. Well, friends, any questions? That's a lot of material. But I hope that as we talk about it, you see God. I hope that if you came a tourist or a person who just wanted to read it, that you left with something that can help you be a pilgrim in a way that's a blessing to you as you kind of come into Holy Week. And I hope you'll make time this year to be very involved. I guess the one thing I'll say is, and I try to share this each kind of year as we get up to Good Friday, but if you go to a Good Friday service, don't miss Easter. Okay, one year I was a college student and I went to a Good Friday service and I ended up getting strep throat over that weekend and I missed Easter. I was kind of like in a funk and almost depressed for like a year, right? And I didn't realize that like, oh yeah, I missed Easter, no wonder, because I mean, the last thing I heard was, you killed Jesus, and then I needed a little grace before I could get to that next place. But anyway, kind of fun story back then. So please, we're looking forward to turning toward these texts in worship. So wonderful. Any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. So let me ask that question real quick. So is the turning over of the tables showing the humanity or the divinity of Jesus? Is that him just getting frustrated and kind of losing it on there? I would say that the story where he zaps the fig tree, which has a lot of symbolism, is a little bit more of like, he's about to go to the cross and I'm going to cut Jesus some slack for zapping that little tree, right? I think that might be a better one. Here, I believe, and I think I asserted it, and if I didn't, let me assert it more demonstratively. I assert that the turning over the tables is him bringing the righteous judgment, vindication, and wrath of God on those people who are making a mockery of grace. I don't think that's his humanity. I think that's the divinity. I think the divine, when we sin, hurts. I mean, that's the story of half the Bible. Like, the divine is not pleased with human sin. Now, it's not right to call divine vindictive. Instead, it's grace-filled. But when people refuse grace, there is judgment, right? And that was the judgment on those moneylenders at that time in that place. Also, it's a good way to make sure you get crucified, right? Which is what it did functionally. So there are two parts I would focus on. And in fact, let me go three, because I don't think you're wrong, though, about your interpretation. I want to say that I think it fits nicely with the other two. So was his humanity involved? Absolutely. But also, too, I would say it wasn't his humanity instead of his divinity. Because what I would never want us to do is create a false God or to act like God doesn't care, right? How to say, I cannot conceive of a being, and I wouldn't want to, frankly, who doesn't care enough about me to get upset with me occasionally. I mean, that's apathy. I got that in spades all over town. All right, everybody's just tired. They don't want to do anything. They'll make it to the restaurant. Oh, I can't come back to church yet. It's not safe. What? Are you kidding me? If I put your grandkids on stage, you're going to be there, right? No, I'm just joking. Stay safe. But I mean, I guess I've got apathy all over the place, right? I think that that's not what we want in the divine. The divine cares about the hairs on your head, the choices you make, who you are. We have a compassionate deity, but passion's at the heart of it. And if there's not passion enough to get angry when people habitually have created a system that deprives people the grace of God and the truth about compassion, like, what else can you get angry at? So, but I think Luke, and here, and mind you, and we can talk about this. I don't believe in a God that's angry with us, so don't mishear that. But I'm trying to channel my inner Luke. And so that's why I'm trying to answer the way I think Luke would go. Luke wants a God that cares, is present, and is involved, because the absence of that would mean God's just this clockmaker in a distance who doesn't, y'all have it and good luck. And to me, that's kind of hell. That's not heaven. That's not the age of resurrection. I think God's passionate and cares. So I do actually, that's more of what I think. But yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, Robbie. Right. Yeah. Right. So the question Robbie's asking is a couple of there's this movement where you have the scribes and the Pharisees are afraid of the people and they don't quite know how to handle them. They want to get it into the Roman authorities. Why aren't the Romans afraid of the people, and kind of what's going on with all this? Well, and we know ahead that the crowd is going to turn against Jesus. And so what's up with kind of all of that? And so in the next hour and a half, I'm going to walk you through, but let's kind of break that down, because I think it's a great question. And we saw it today there. I think that the first part, when we talk about this crowd and what's going on, yeah, I mean, remember in the first century, even the Romans have just shields and swords. So there aren't like machine guns or weapons or other things where authorities can have the discipline. So the first part that the chief scribes and the Pharisees are concerned about is they're supposed, like, their credibility with the Roman authorities is that they can keep the crowds and the people in check. And that if you don't have at least the pretense of temple worship, that all society would collapse, you'd have a war on your hands and all that. And frankly, in the rule of Tiberius, when he slaughters a pig in the holiest of holies, you know what? The Pharisees and scribes are correct, right? Like if you can create if the Romans can create an accommodation here, I would say this is about as tricky as some of our kind of politics in Iraq were, when how we're trying to navigate these different sects and how to move between them and to have something that would create a stable formula in a place that at that time couldn't be stable, right? I think that's the same problem the Romans are up against. Now, why aren't the Romans afraid like the others? The Romans aren't afraid because, how to say that, the only Romans there are military. So the Romans who are there are the legion, and they don't mind. They want order first, but they have a short fuse. Like if they can't get, if the people that, I had to explain to me like this by Mishi, who will be our tour guide in Israel. He said it like this. He said, we were talking about a slightly different situation, but he's like, you've got to understand how things have been run here for thousands of years. If you've got a guy who kind of loses it, who's running a country for you, and he kills 500 and you can't stand that, what you do is you kill him and you tell the next guy that you put in place, well, just kill 50 a year. You gotta like do that. That's how it's run in a very kind of fist kind of way. The Romans very much ran things like that. They're very authoritarian, very top down. And what the scribes and the Pharisees are trying to do is to walk that line between the religious zealous of their, and not zealots, but zealousness, right? The desire for religious revival of their people and the Roman authority. Well, what they're trying to do is walk a line that can't be walked. They're trying to be in a place where they can't. And this is why inevitably they're going to fail. And they've had success before. They've been able to keep things together and somewhat peaceful. And they were okay with John the Baptist getting killed. And that Jesus is different And the people around Jesus aren't going to be okay with those things. Things have changed, and it's about to break out. And at this point, they think it's going to change from someone who's going to be doing basically a coup or a grab of power. However, they have no idea how different the world's about to be. I mean, they don't even have a clue of the difference because they can't, it's a failure of imagination. They can't imagine a world in which Jesus is Lord. Like they can't fathom that. So that's the disconnect there. Looking though more at the Romans are very careful. Watch what happens when Jesus gets with, as we keep reading in the weeks ahead, watch what happens when Jesus goes before Pilate. Pilate? Right. Yeah. So what I've learned in life, and about power specifically, is there are some people when they look at power, they, only the worst kind of person tries to grab, exert, take power, make power, be powerful toward other people. The vast majority of people in positions of authority underestimate how much authority or power they have. That they don't think of themselves. They think of themselves as having limits and checks and balance, people who are around them. So like Pilate is there, and Pilate isn't he's not a person who believes he can just squash everybody in the province. He's trying to figure out, how do I get them to want to be Roman, part of this Roman system? And so he's trying to navigate how to do. I mean, he just built them this massive city, allowing Herod to build Caesarea Maritima to make a much more civilized place. And the Romans can't understand, between that and Zephora and some other stuff, why don't they all want to just leave Jerusalem and come live like us? We got plumbing. They don't have plumbing. We've got games, we've got stuff. Like, why don't they want what we want? They can't understand the religiosity that's pulling these people to this place and to follow Jesus. So yeah, I think you're going to watch Pilate. And in fact, Pilate in John's gospel, trying to get it more clear, it's there in Luke some, but it's so beautiful because he'll eventually say, when Jesus says, I am the truth in John, the response, Caius Veritas. It's one of the few times where actually a lot of the manuscripts will have it in Latin. What is truth? I mean, he's seeking. And in fact, there's a tradition that comes around Pilate later. And so by the 4th and 5th century, there's actually a gospel of Pilate that emerged in the Christian tradition, because all these Romans who came to Christ were like, for them, they're like, no, he had to eventually get it like we did, right? So they're, that's why it's not in our canon. I mean, people always say, oh, we found this lost book. No, we knew about all those books. We left them out. They're fun devotional reading, right? It's like C.S. Lewis, right? I like reading C.S. But C.S. Lewis isn't the Bible, right? You see the difference. It's fun devotional reading, but it's not the gospel. It was written much later. But it's interesting. But this question you're asking is the core of that. Other questions? I'm sorry, I probably went too long on that answer. Any questions on Zoom? We still have a few left on Zoom. I didn't know if y'all had any other questions. I've got 5 more minutes and I'll have to go. I'm going to stay in this room. And if you have a question that you didn't get to ask because you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, I'll stay so you can ask me personally. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.